Hello, directors. My name is Philip Kobernick, and I'm a programs manager here at Peninsula Clean Energy on our programs team. And I'll be talking about what we're doing to advance transportation electrification. So, starting off at a high level, here are some of the strategies that are in play across the state at the statewide level and local levels to reduce transportation emissions. And these are all with the goal of getting to zero transportation emissions by 2045. And again, there's a number of strategies involving building transit oriented housing so folks can live car free or car light lifestyles, low carbon fuels other than electricity, mode shift, which would be a reduction in vehicle miles traveled, something specifically called out in SB 375, and certainly a challenge as VMT is going up. The electrification of personal vehicles and shared vehicles, and in the future, possibly shared autonomous vehicles. And as a load serving entity that is now serving the community with greenhouse gas free electricity, we're really focusing on the electrification of vehicles, both personal vehicles and shared vehicles, as our strategy to reduce transportation emissions. So here is an overview of all the areas that the programs team is focusing on. There's three main areas. There's building electrification, transportation electrification, and resiliency. And so I'll be focusing on transportation electrification, and this is the largest part of the program's approved budget. It's a little over 20 million over the next 4 years. And of that, EV infrastructure is the major component of projected spending in that time and from our approved budget. And I'll be going over all of these categories in more detail. So looking at how the PCE programs team fits within larger statewide goals and EV targets. By 2025, the state of California has a goal that over 250,000 EV charging stations will have been installed by this point. It's a significant ramp up from the 70,000 or so that are installed today, so over a 3x increase in just the next 4 years. By 2030, the state is supposed to have achieved 5 million zero emissions vehicles deployed onto California roads. And that would be nearly a 10 times increase from where we are today. So again, certainly a big, steep road ahead of us. And that also lines up with a goal to have emissions reduced by 40%, greenhouse gas emissions reduced by 40% by 2030. By 2035, Governor Newsom's mandate kicks in, and this is that there will be no new light-duty gas vehicle sales at this point. So all electric or zero emissions vehicles going forward for new vehicle sales. And by 2045, Governor Brown's executive order will have kicked in, and by this point, the state of California should have achieved statewide carbon neutrality. So really, by this point, the complete elimination of fossil fuel vehicles. So let's take a look at how that looks right now here in San Mateo County. So I've included the on-road vehicle mix on the left. So there's roughly about 650,000 registered vehicles currently in San Mateo County. This is as of 2019, and we'll be getting our 2020 numbers shortly. Now, of these vehicles, nearly 90% are personally owned. So that's the vast majority of the on-road vehicle composition in San Mateo County, nearly 600,000 vehicles. And then the remaining 12% are mixes of fleets. So we have the rental fleet, about 7% of vehicles, mostly located around SFO and serving the airport. Private vehicle fleets, these are private commercial fleets that range from light duty to medium and heavy duty trucks. And that's about 5% of the on-road vehicle mix. And then finally, government fleet is rounding out the sector there, and that's a very, very small share of total vehicles in San Mateo County. Now, of all of our total vehicles, we have roughly 25,000 EVs on the road already, so about 4%. And again, we will be updating our numbers shortly, so that will increase. but it'll be somewhere between 25 and 30,000 or so in that range. Now, how does our on-road vehicles translate into transportation emissions? And that is what this chart on the right is showing. And this is from a CARB model. And over half of our transportation emissions come from personally owned vehicles, since they do represent the vast majority of vehicles on the road. So the blue and the red that I have circled here are personal passenger vehicles and personal light-duty trucks and SUVs. And this is currently what we are focusing on in our electrification efforts. And you can see other sectors that will be areas of future focus, particularly fleets and medium-duty trucks, also as that market evolves. Okay, this graph is looking to show what it looks like to get to zero gasoline vehicles. And kind of how does that look over time, and how will our programs potentially change and adopt to meet a changing world as EVs become more and more common. So looking at this graph on the left, the lines represent new vehicle sales on a year-to-year basis. The blue being gas cars, new gas cars that are purchased every year, and the green being new EVs that are purchased every year. So over time, we hope and expect that that blue part of the bar ramps down and then is taken over by the green as EVs become the only vehicles that are being sold. Now this orange line represents the percent of gas cars that are in use on the road here in San Mateo County. And this decreases rapidly, but then stretches out as it takes time to cycle cars off the road. And so on the right, I've broken this down into sort of 5 phases of EV adoption and how that looks. The first phase was the very beginning, and fortunately we are past that. The second phase, which I would consider where we currently are, is EVs are really just picking up momentum, but they really haven't stuck yet. So in this case, EVs are 5% or more of new vehicle sales, which is where we're at now. We're approaching price parity, but not totally there yet. And there's many new EV models, which is great. So models that folks are wanting to buy are becoming available. And in this stage, our program efforts really focus a lot on incentives, both new and used vehicle incentives. So getting folks to retire their car maybe sooner than they would think, and supporting the used EV market. Lots of education and outreach, getting folks familiar with EVs, getting them in an EV if they haven't seen one before is pretty critical. And then, of course, infrastructure really needs to be built out to support the growth of EVs. So public and MUD, our multi-unit dwelling or multi-family housing, these charging infrastructure support is critical to remove barriers to scaling as we move up. So phase 3, which will be somewhere maybe in the next 4 to 6 years or so, is really where the momentum for EVs has really started to build. So by this point, EVs are 20% of new vehicle sales, and 10% of all on-road vehicles have already transitioned to EVs. We're already, by this point, predicted to be at price parity by some economists, and I expect this will be in the next 4 to 5 years. So they already cost the same for new vehicles. And now EVs are available in most vehicle types, including trucks and vans, which are not really available yet. And we've received proven results in local fleets, and that commercial and government fleet sector starts to take off. By this point, our program's efforts will likely still have pretty strong equity incentives that will be continuing for vehicle purchases, and the infrastructure will still need to be built out. So those 2 areas will be pretty key on expanding charging infrastructure and making sure that EVs can be affordable for everyone. Now by phase 4, which will be around 2035, maybe 10 years after the previous phase, momentum is already way off. EVs are clearly the mainstream, and then now this is where mandates can start to kick in. So by this point, every new vehicle is electric, and about 60% of the on-road vehicles are electric by this point. So about half of gas vehicles are still in use, but none are being purchased. Governor Newsom's mandate has kicked in for vehicle sales to be only zero emissions at this point. And from our program's efforts, there will be a shift from new vehicle incentives really to vehicle buybacks and early retirements, getting folks to get those gas cars off the road and helping them do that, since gas cars will probably have little to no resale value. There also might be some niche use cases, folks that keep their cars for a long time for various reasons and working on ways to electrify or retire those gas vehicles. And by phase 5, so this is by 2040 out, this is really the last holdouts. By this point, EVs are 80% of all vehicles on the road. By law, transit has already been fully electrified, and this is where additional stick policies or penalties might be helpful to electrify kind of the final holdouts. And by this point, infrastructure is nearly or completely really all built out by this point, and incentives will have phased out by this point. Okay, so now I'll be talking about the various programs that are in use right now and our programs team to help us electrify vehicles here in San Mateo County. And I'll be starting with our flagship infrastructure program called EV Ready. This is a $28 million program over 4 years, with $16 million coming from PCE and $12 million coming from the California Energy Commission. And our target here is to install 3,500 EV charging ports at multifamily housing, workplace, and public parking. And this is a partnership with ClearResult, who is providing really innovative technical assistance in this program, including advanced power management strategies, which I'll be talking about in a second here. There is a strong workforce training component to this and a preferred contractor network, so a union labor requirement with IBEW. And to highlight kind of how we are looking at power management strategies to reduce the installation costs for EV infrastructure, I've included a real-life example here. So this is a apartment complex here in San Mateo County. It's 17 units and is 70 years old. So it was built in the 1970s, basically. So it's a pretty typical apartment complex. And so they came to us wanting 2 dual port charging stations. And through engaging them on technical assistance, we came back with a scope that said, we can actually do 15 level 1 charging stations and 2 level 2 charging stations with power management and provide access to everyone at a much more cost-effective project. So that project was $5,000 per port. And to do something equivalent with the traditional level 2 installation would have cost nearly 3 times more. So we're really demonstrating that we can provide charging access to all at a lower cost. All right, so vehicle incentives remain a major component of our program efforts. From 2018 to 2020, we offered new vehicle incentives, and now we have switched focus to used vehicle incentives. We've been doing low-income used vehicle incentives since 2019, and now we'll be expanding that program in a partnership with Grid Alternatives. So we'll have a general used vehicle incentive available to anyone, and then an adder for low-income residents as well. Engagement has been a major effort from the programs team to familiarize people with EVs and then get them in an EV and let them see how fun that is. And that's been a partnership with Reach Strategies. And during the pandemic, since we couldn't do in-person events, we've pivoted to an EV rental rebate. So folks can rent an EV for the weekend and then get reimbursed. And that's an active program that's currently going on. And all of these efforts combined have been about $1 million in spend over the last few years. We've incentivized just about 500 vehicles, and of those, about 100 have been low income. And for our events, we've organized 16 events over the last few years, and that has attracted 1,600 participants. We're also doing a number of pilots to try out new strategies and test out new methods here, and I'll be going over 3. So the first is a low power charging pilot. And so this was taking a look at what are some ways that we can reduce the cost of putting in EV charging, particularly at multifamily housing, which tends to be older and energy constrained. And so for that, we looked at smart outlets. And so these are internet connected outlets. The company we went with is called Plugzio, and we installed those at 3 apartment complexes. And for that, we demonstrated a cost of $4,500 per port to install these outlets, and that includes a couple years of networking fees prepaid for the site host. And this is 75% cheaper than a level 2 installation and still provides 40 to 50 or more miles of range per night, which is more than the daily average need for San Mateo County. The second pilot is managed charging, and that was taking a look at how can we move charging around from hours that are really hard to serve with renewable energy to hours that are better served by renewable energy. And so this was a technical proof of concept with flex charging to test out telematics-based controls instead of using networked chargers, which are pretty rare. And so with this pilot, we saw 50% reduction in peak loads, which was fantastic. And we're currently looking at ways to further scale that. And the final pilot is a curbside charging pilot. So looking at other types of innovative ways to bring charging solutions by tapping into either street light circuits or other public circuits and provide more charging opportunities for folks who can't charge at home. The other major effort that the programs team has been involved with is developing and implementing REACH codes locally. So these are model building codes that go above the state level in terms of mandating low carbon or methane free buildings and EV readiness. And on the EV side, the model code provides 100% charging access to residents through a blend of level 2 and level 1 charging. We're offering assistance and training to agencies, developers, and contractors. And this is a partnership with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And so far, 11 REACH codes have been adopted. And finally, here's a look at some of the upcoming programs and pilots that we have. So there's 3. The first is our e-bike rebate program, which will be called e-bikes for everyone. This will be launching shortly and is an $800 rebate for income qualified residents. And this is a partnership with the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition and local bike shops to administer it. And again, that'll be launching shortly. The second is our ride-hail electrification pilot. And now this is a EV rental rebate for drivers who are renting cars to drive for Lyft. And our goal is to get 100 EVs on the road later this year. And this is a partnership with Lyft, obviously. And the exciting thing about this is it's a first in California project. So this type of partnership and effort has not been done in California. So we're really excited about that. And the last is our municipal fleets program. So this will be really a lot of project development assistance and implementation assistance, working with a couple of fleets per year to plan out and execute a project, get some stations in the ground, and help them start building the momentum of getting more EVs integrated into their fleets. And there's also another pilot built into this program, which is our vehicle to building demonstration pilot, looking at how fleet EVs can be mobile emergency power assets, essentially. So not only are they great low-cost vehicles in a fleet, but they can also be emergency assets. And so we'll be looking to do a demonstration as part of that program. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time.